They asked for aid, but the Deathworlders of Earth came instead. The Zephyrian colony of Varian Prime spun slowly beneath them, a small blue and green jewel surrounded by harsh deserts and jagged mountains. It was a beautiful world, but one that had recently become a nightmare. The Krathar, a violent and merciless alien species, had begun their assault months ago. Cities had fallen, forests had burned, and rivers ran dark with pollution and death. The Zephyrians, peaceful by nature and delicate in body, were unprepared for such violence. Their soldiers, trained in strategy but weak in combat, had been driven back to the capital, hiding behind fragile shields that barely withstood the Krathar's heavy weapons. In the void above Varian Prime, a small human reconnaissance ship drifted quietly. It was not large, not armed heavily, but it moved with purpose. Commander Ethan Blake watched the planet below, his eyes sharp and unblinking. He had seen many worlds, many species, and many conflicts, but something about this distress signal had caught his attention. It was not just the urgency in their message, it was the desperation. The Zephyrians did not ask for aid lightly. Ethan tapped a finger on the control panel, sending a stream of data back to Earth's central command. "This is not a drill," he said softly to the empty cockpit, though his voice carried a sense of authority that filled the space. "They need help, and they need it now." He had learned over the years that other species often misunderstood humans. Many considered Earth dangerous, even chaotic, but that was precisely why humans survived where others could not. They were resilient, adaptable, and utterly relentless. And while the Zephyrians had hoped for diplomats or medics, the truth was that Earth did not send diplomats to battlefields where survival hung by a thread. Earth sent Deathworlders. The signal crackled again, repeating the same desperate plea. Ethan adjusted the frequency, listening carefully. The message was short, urgent, almost pleading. "We cannot hold. Krathar will destroy all. Request immediate aid," the words repeated, looping in a way that made the human commander's jaw tighten. He did not need a second invitation. He had faced situations like this before, though rarely on a scale of planetary danger. Below, the Zephyrian capital had begun to prepare for what little hope they had left. They did not know what was coming. They did not know that their saviors would not be careful diplomats, not gentle medics, not even cautious soldiers. Humans were different. Humans did not see hopelessness as an obstacle. They saw it as a challenge. Ethan's ship glided into orbit, moving smoothly past the atmosphere and the thin clouds that swirled over the planet. He activated the comms once more, reaching out to Earth. "Requesting permission to engage," he said clearly, though he already knew the answer. Approval would come, as always, because humans were the last line, the final fire that burned when all else seemed lost. A flicker of light signaled the incoming transmission. Earth's voice was calm, official, but beneath it lay the unspoken acknowledgement of what this meant. "Permission granted. You are cleared to act as you see fit. Remember, the Zephyrians are fragile. Handle with care." Ethan shook his head, almost smiling. Handle with care, that was a polite way of saying don't scare them to death. The Zephyrians needed more than caution. They needed survival. They needed humans. As the ship descended toward the planet, Ethan studied the surface below. The capital city was a mixture of delicate towers and crystalline buildings, all glowing faintly with energy. Some of the structures were damaged, shattered by previous skirmishes. Smoke rose from several districts, curling into the sky like black snakes. Despite the chaos, life persisted. Small Zephyrians moved in the streets, tending to the wounded, trying to salvage what they could. Their courage was admirable, but their bodies were frail, their instincts not made for battle. The landing was smooth, precise, and quiet. The humans emerged in their exosuits, tall and imposing, their armor reflecting the sunlight. Captain Laura Mitchell led the way, her face calm and focused beneath the helmet. Behind her, Sergeant Ryan Carter carried a heavy weapon, checking every strap and device with careful efficiency. Ethan followed, observing the city and its inhabitants. The Zephyrians froze at the sight of them. Their eyes were wide, their delicate mouths open in awe and fear. They had expected someone small, someone careful, someone who would treat them as fragile children. Instead, they saw humans who looked like predators, strong, tall, and unyielding. Every step the humans took seemed purposeful, every movement precise, every glance calculated. A Zephyrian elder approached, moving slowly on slender legs. Her voice was high-pitched, melodic, and trembling. Are you here to help us?" she asked, Laura nodded once. "We are here to help," she said firmly, "but you must follow our lead. We will protect you, but you must listen." The elder glanced around nervously, looking at her people who were now gathering behind her. We are not fighters. We cannot fight. The Krathar, they will destroy us." Laura's eyes softened slightly, though her tone remained strong. "We know, that is why we are here. But you must understand, this will not be gentle. We will do what we must to survive. You may not understand our methods, but you will live because of them." The humans moved quickly, assessing the city, marking weak points, and identifying areas where the Krathar might strike first. Their actions were efficient, almost terrifying in their speed. The Zephyrians whispered among themselves, unsure whether to be grateful or frightened. Ethan stepped forward, speaking to the elder. "We need to know where your people are hiding, where the wounded are, and where the Krathar are likely to strike. The more we know, the better chance we have of saving lives." The elder hesitated, but finally nodded. "Follow me," she said. "I will show you the shelters, there and there and there." The humans followed, moving through streets that were partially destroyed. The Zephyrians watched as the humans carefully inspected buildings, tested structural integrity, and even listened for sounds that only their enhanced hearing could detect. Laura knelt beside a collapsed wall and pointed out weak spots. "This could fall if they fire their energy weapons here," she said. "We can reinforce it or use it as a trap." Ryan grinned, almost enjoying the chaos. "I like traps," he said, "especially the ones that explode." The Zephyrians flinched at his words, but Ethan simply shook his head. Humans were not cruel, they were practical. They saw danger and answered it with force. That was what made them terrifying, and that was what made them effective. As night fell over the city, the humans set up a perimeter. They used whatever the Zephyrians had, reinforcing walls with energy shields, setting alarms, and placing traps in the streets. The city, which had seemed fragile and doomed, began to feel like a fortress. Not because the humans were gentle or careful, but because they were relentless, fearless, and unyielding. The elder approached Ethan once more, her small hands shaking. "Your people, they are strong. I have never seen anything like this." Ethan looked at the humans moving among the streets, checking their positions, adjusting shields, and preparing for the inevitable. "Strength is not just in the body," he said quietly. "It is in the will to survive. Humans do not give up, not ever. That is what makes them dangerous and what makes them powerful." From the horizon, a faint glow appeared. The Krathar ships were returning, drawn by the presence of humans. They expected a weak planet, an easy conquest, but they would find something else entirely. The Zephyrians did not yet know what humans were capable of. They would soon see in ways they could never have imagined. The humans, undeterred, continued their work. Laura and Ryan moved to the highest point of the city, scanning the horizon. "They're coming," Laura said. "But they don't know what's waiting for them," Ryan smirked. "They're about to learn, and I hope they scream when they do." Ethan watched silently, a small smile crossing his face. The Zephyrians had called for help. They had not called for Deathworlders. But humans were exactly that. And when the Krathar came, they would see why Earth's people were feared across the galaxy. For now, the city was quiet, save for the occasional hum of shields and the soft footsteps of humans moving among the frightened Zephyrians. The night stretched long and dark, but for the first time in months, the Zephyrians felt a glimmer of hope. It was faint, fragile, but real, and it came from the most unlikely source: humans who thrived where others would perish and fought where others would run. Above them, the stars continued their cold vigil, unaware that soon chaos and fire would streak across the sky, and a small human squad would change the fate of an entire world. The first light of dawn stretched over Varian Prime, casting long shadows across the ruined city. The Zephyrians were awake, though many moved quietly, afraid of what the new day might bring. Humans, however, had little time for fear. They moved with purpose, checking every corner, every street, and every building. Captain Laura Mitchell led the small squad, her eyes sharp, taking in everything. Sergeant Ryan Carter followed closely, carrying his weapon ready, scanning for threats. Commander Ethan Blake observed from behind, calculating the best ways to protect the fragile city. The Zephyrians watched the humans in awe. They were unlike any beings they had ever seen. Humans were large, strong, and fearless. They moved in ways that seemed reckless to the Zephyrians, but every step, every action was precise. It was as if danger did not touch them. The humans were already preparing for a battle the Zephyrians feared they could not survive. Laura knelt by a shattered fountain in the city square. "We need to organize civilians and set safe zones," she said. "We cannot fight and protect people if they are scattered." "We need control," the elder nodded, trying to understand. "Our people, they are weak. We are not fighters like you." Laura shook her head gently. "You do not have to be. We will fight. You just need to follow instructions and stay safe. Do exactly as we say, and you will survive." The humans began instructing the Zephyrians, guiding them to underground shelters, marking safe routes, and organizing small teams to carry the wounded. The aliens moved slowly, unsure at first, but gradually followed. The humans' confidence was contagious, and soon the city streets were alive with movement, preparation, and whispered hope. Ethan walked through one of the streets, observing a Zephyrian family huddled together. "Stay close," he said. "Do not leave the group. When we fight, you stay safe here." The family nodded quickly, trusting the humans even though they did not fully understand them. There was something about humans that inspired obedience, even respect. By midday, the humans had finished their initial survey. They had mapped out the city, identified weak points, and prepared fallback positions. Ryan placed small sensors along the streets and rooftops, devices that would alert them to movement, vibrations, or energy signatures. "They won't get past this," he said confidently. "We'll know the moment they move." Laura looked toward the horizon where faint silhouettes of Krathar ships began to appear. "They are coming sooner than I thought," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. The humans had faced danger before, but they never underestimated it. The Zephyrians began to panic. They will kill us," one whispered, trembling. Ethan stepped forward. "Not if we fight smart. Humans do not run, humans do not hide, humans fight, and we will protect you. But you must trust us." The first attack came in the late afternoon. The sky darkened as Krathar ships entered the atmosphere, dropping small raiding parties across the city. They were fast, ruthless, and strong, expecting easy prey, but the humans were ready. Laura and Ryan moved quickly. Ryan detonated a small, controlled explosion, collapsing a partially ruined building and blocking a Krathar advance. The aliens screamed, confused by the humans' tactics. They had never encountered an enemy who used the environment itself as a weapon. Laura led a squad through the streets, striking Krathar patrols with precise attacks. Humans moved in ways the Zephyrians could not understand. They ducked, rolled, and struck with weapons that burned, sliced, or crushed with terrifying efficiency. Even wounded humans continued to fight, ignoring pain, shrugging off injuries that would have killed other species. Ethan observed from a vantage point, impressed. Humans were not just strong, they were unpredictable. The Krathar were trained killers, but they were used to strength measured by size and speed. Humans fought with cunning, improvisation, and an unyielding will. They were chaos incarnate, and the Krathar could not anticipate their next move. The Zephyrians watched from shelters, their eyes wide with awe. They had called for help, expecting gentle healers or careful soldiers. Instead, they saw humans turn their fragile city into a battlefield and survive. The humans were not careful. They were unstoppable. Hours passed. The Krathar regrouped, attempting to flank the humans, but the sensors Ryan had placed alerted them immediately. Humans appeared from the shadows, striking the attackers with a force the Zephyrians had never seen. Buildings that had seemed defenseless were now deadly traps, filled with explosives and clever mechanisms. One Krathar soldier entered a ruined courtyard, only to be caught in a net trap that lifted him into the air before a burst of energy knocked him unconscious. The Zephyrians whispered among themselves. "They are incredible," one said. "I do not understand, but they are protecting us." Laura moved through the city, shouting instructions. "Civilians to shelters, watch the rooftops, do not approach the enemies alone." She worked with Ethan and Ryan to coordinate every move. The humans were fast, decisive, and fearless. Where the Krathar expected chaos, they found a strange, disciplined force that refused to be broken. Even when a group of Krathar managed to reach a residential district, the humans responded with ingenuity. Ryan detonated a series of charges that blocked the attacker's path. Laura appeared from the side, striking the lead Krathar with a precise blow that sent it crashing into debris. Humans moved like shadows, striking quickly and disappearing before the enemy could react. By evening, the tide of the battle had begun to turn. The Krathar were retreating in confusion, unable to predict the humans' next move. They had expected easy prey, but instead faced creatures who used courage, strategy, and raw unpredictability as weapons. The Zephyrians emerged from their shelters cautiously. They walked through streets littered with debris and unconscious Krathar. Their city had been damaged, but it had survived. Humans were everywhere, tending to the wounded, securing the streets, and preparing for the next attack. Ethan watched the Zephyrians, noting their mixture of fear and admiration. "This is what humans do," he said softly. "They survive, they protect. They fight when no one else can, and they never give up." The Zephyrians approached the humans slowly, unsure how to express their gratitude. One young alien, barely taller than a human child, stepped forward. Why are you like this?" the alien asked. "Why do you not run? Why do you not fear death?" Laura knelt, meeting the small alien's eyes. "Because we have to survive. Because we fight for those who cannot. Because giving up is not an option. We do not see death as the end. We see it as a challenge, a test, and we refuse to fail." The alien blinked, trying to understand. It was a concept foreign to the Zephyrians. They valued life, yes, but they could not imagine facing death with such determination, such fearlessness. Humans did not fight because they wanted glory. They fought because they refused to be broken. As night fell, the humans set up defensive perimeters around the city. Laura and Ryan patrolled the streets, checking every corner, every trap, every potential weakness. Ethan monitored from above, coordinating movements and ensuring the city remained secure. The Krathar, though powerful and ruthless, had learned that Earth's Deathworlders were not to be underestimated. The Zephyrians, huddled together in their shelters, whispered among themselves. They had asked for aid, but what had arrived was something far greater. Humans were not simply soldiers. They were legends, warriors forged in the harshest conditions of Earth, capable of turning hopeless situations into victories. Above them, the stars shone cold and distant, watching as humans prepared for the battles yet to come. The city, battered but alive, stood as a testament to their power. The Krathar would return, but when they did, they would face not fragility but unyielding strength. Humans would not just defend the city, they would transform it into a fortress, a trap, and a warning. And the Zephyrians, fragile as they were, would survive because of them. The night stretched on, filled with the quiet hum of energy shields and the soft clatter of human movement. The Krathar regrouped beyond the horizon, unaware of the traps, tactics, and sheer will that awaited them. For the first time in months, the Zephyrians slept not in fear but in hope. Hope born from humans, Earth's Deathworlders, who did not ask permission, did not consider danger, and did not bow to the impossible. Ethan looked out at the city one last time before taking a brief rest. "They called for aid," he murmured, "but they got humans. And humans are nothing like anything they expected." The wind swept across the broken streets, carrying with it the scent of dust, smoke, and something else, something alien and new. The Zephyrians were alive, the humans were ready. And the Krathar, who thought this world would fall easily, would soon learn that they had underestimated not just strength, but spirit. The sun had barely risen over Varian Prime, but the city was already alive with movement. Humans never rested for long, not when there was danger approaching. Captain Laura Mitchell moved through the streets with Sergeant Ryan Carter and Commander Ethan Blake, checking defensive positions and reinforcing the barricades. The Zephyrians followed cautiously, still amazed and frightened by the humans' presence. They had begun to realize that these beings from Earth were not like anyone they had ever met. They were terrifying, relentless, and utterly fearless. Ethan scanned the horizon through a high-powered scope. "They're coming again," he said, his voice calm but tense. In the distance, dark shapes moved, the silhouettes of Krathar ships dropping small raiding parties into the city. The aliens were fast, well-coordinated, and brutal, but they had not yet faced humans like these. Laura turned to the Zephyrians. "Stay inside shelters and follow instructions exactly. Do not try to fight. We will handle this. Just stay safe." She did not need to tell them twice. Even those who had fled in fear before now understood that survival depended on trusting the humans. The first wave of Krathar attackers hit the city streets just as the sun rose higher. Their energy weapons glowed with deadly intensity, scorching buildings and breaking through weak defenses. Civilians screamed and scrambled for cover, but the humans moved like lightning. Ryan detonated carefully placed charges, collapsing parts of ruined buildings onto the Krathar, cutting off their advance. The aliens roared in confusion, their disciplined ranks thrown into chaos by unpredictable traps. Laura led a squad through the streets, striking quickly and retreating before the enemy could respond. Humans fought with a strange mixture of skill and recklessness that left the Zephyrians in awe. One human soldier rolled into cover, fired a pulse shot that stunned 2 attackers, then rolled again to avoid incoming fire. The Zephyrians could hardly believe their eyes. Ethan watched from a high vantage point, coordinating movements and relaying information to Laura through the comms. Humans were not just strong. They were unpredictable, adaptive, and terrifying to any enemy who relied on patterns and order. The Krathar had never faced beings like these before. In one street, a group of Krathar tried to flank the humans, moving through rubble and debris with lethal precision. Ryan noticed them first and whispered into his comm, "Left side, moving fast." "Traps ready?" Laura nodded and signaled the squad. Within seconds, a net trap lifted the aliens into the air, while a small energy charge knocked the rest to the ground. Humans did not hesitate. They struck with their weapons, neutralizing threats efficiently, leaving the Krathar stunned and disoriented. The Zephyrians peeked from their shelters, seeing humans move with fearlessness they could not comprehend. One young alien whispered to another, They do not fear death. They do not run. How can this be?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because they fight. That is all there is to it. They refuse to lose." The battle continued for hours. The Krathar pressed hard, trying to overwhelm the humans with numbers, but each attack was met with clever defenses and brutal counterattacks. Humans moved like shadows, appearing where the enemy least expected, striking with precision and disappearing again. Every corner, every street, every ruined building was turned into a trap. A group of Zephyrians, trying to help the wounded, froze when a Krathar soldier appeared near their shelter. Laura saw it instantly. She ran forward, drawing the alien's attention, and with a precise strike, took it down. The Zephyrians gasped, realizing that humans risked their lives without hesitation, not out of recklessness, but because saving others mattered more than themselves. Ryan crouched behind a half-collapsed wall, scanning the streets for threats. "There are more coming," he said, "but they won't make it far. I've set charges along their path." He pressed a button, and a series of controlled explosions blocked the attackers' advance, funneling them into a narrow street where humans waited. When the Krathar appeared, Laura and her squad struck with overwhelming force, leaving the attackers no chance to escape. Ethan moved from vantage point to vantage point, coordinating human movements and marking weak spots in the city that could be exploited if needed. He noticed something remarkable. Humans did not just react to danger, they created it. They manipulated the environment, used traps, and turned even destroyed buildings into advantages. The Krathar, who had expected an easy conquest, were slowly learning that these Earth Deathworlders were unlike any enemy they had faced. By mid-afternoon, the city streets were littered with unconscious or retreating Krathar. The humans, though tired, did not rest. They moved methodically, clearing one area before moving to the next. Laura paused to catch her breath and looked at the Zephyrians who had emerged from their shelters to help guide the wounded. "You are doing well," she said. "Keep moving, keep calm, and follow instructions." "We will protect you." A young Zephyrian, barely grown, looked up at her. Why are you like this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why do you fight when it is so dangerous? Why do you not fear?" Laura knelt, meeting his small, wide eyes. "Because we must. We fight to survive, to protect those who cannot fight, and to refuse to be broken. Fear is natural, yes, but we do not let it stop us. Humans fight even when hope seems gone." The boy blinked, trying to understand. His species valued life and careful planning, but the humans' willingness to face death head-on, to risk themselves for others, was impossible to grasp. Yet he knew one thing clearly. Humans were the city's protectors, and without them they would all be lost. As the sun began to set, the Krathar made one last desperate push. Their numbers were larger now, and their attacks more coordinated. They had learned something from the earlier encounters. They could not simply rush the humans, but they hoped to find weaknesses. Laura and Ryan stood ready, flanking the central plaza with Ethan coordinating from above. Humans did not panic. They had trained for situations like this. Their eyes scanned every movement, their bodies ready for instant action. When the Krathar charged, they were met with a barrage of traps, precision strikes, and clever ambushes. A group of Krathar attempted to break through a barricade. Ryan detonated charges under a ruined building, collapsing it onto them. Laura led a squad through a side street, taking down attackers who had survived the explosion. Humans fought as one, moving together, protecting each other, and leaving no opening for the enemy. The Zephyrians could only watch, their fear slowly replaced by awe. These humans were not ordinary soldiers. They were unstoppable, relentless, and fearless. They did not fight for glory or conquest. They fought because survival demanded it, and they fought for those who could not defend themselves. Hours passed, and the Krathar began to retreat, driven back by human tactics and sheer determination. The city was battered, streets broken, but the humans stood victorious. Their bodies bore cuts, bruises, and burns, yet they moved with the same relentless energy, checking on civilians and securing every area. Ethan observed the retreat, noting the shock in the Krathar ranks. These aliens had faced many species before, but none had fought like humans. They had never met beings who could survive such conditions, who could fight through exhaustion, who could turn ruined streets and crumbling buildings into advantages. Humans were chaos, cunning, and courage all in one, and the Krathar had learned that underestimating them was a fatal mistake. The Zephyrians gathered around the humans, offering small gifts, trying to show gratitude in ways their culture allowed. Laura shook her head, smiling slightly. "No gifts, stay alive, that is enough for us." One elder approached Ethan, his voice trembling. "Your people, they are not like anyone we have known. They fight for others. They do not fear death." I do not understand, but we are grateful. We would have been lost without them." Ethan nodded. "That is what humans do. We fight, we survive, we protect those who cannot. That is all there is to it." The Zephyrians whispered among themselves, realizing that they had called for aid, expecting gentle healers or careful soldiers. Instead, they received humans, creatures who thrived under danger, who turned hopeless situations into victories, and who refused to be broken. As night fell, the city grew quiet once more. Humans patrolled the streets, checked the shelters, and prepared for the possibility of another attack. The Krathar, though defeated for now, were still out there, planning, waiting, and underestimating humans at their peril. The Zephyrians, huddled in safe areas, could finally sleep, though lightly. They had survived another day, and the humans had shown them what true courage and strength looked like. Humans were not simply warriors. They were legends in action, born from a harsh world that made them relentless, fearless, and unstoppable. Ethan looked at the city, at the exhausted but vigilant humans moving through the streets, and said quietly, "They asked for aid, but they got humans, and humans do not fight like anyone else in the galaxy. That is why they will survive, and why others will remember them forever." Above the city, the stars shone silently. The Krathar were regrouping, but they did not yet understand the danger they faced. Humans did not just defend, they transformed the battlefield, turned fear into strength, and showed that Earth's Deathworlders were not just survivors. They were legends, and this was only the beginning. The next morning, the city of Varian Prime seemed almost peaceful. The sun rose over shattered streets and half-ruined buildings, painting them in a soft, golden light. Smoke still drifted from some areas, but the humans were already moving. Captain Laura Mitchell walked through the streets, her eyes sharp, scanning for any sign of the Krathar. Beside her, Sergeant Ryan Carter checked the traps they had set the day before, ensuring everything was ready. Commander Ethan Blake observed from above, marking enemy positions and coordinating movements. The Zephyrians followed cautiously, still in awe of the humans' strength and speed. They had begun to realize that their saviors were not ordinary soldiers. They were creatures who thrived in danger, who turned hopeless situations into victories. The humans' presence had transformed their city from a fragile ruin into a fortified stronghold. Ethan spoke into his comms. "Krathar activity detected at the northern perimeter. Laura, Ryan, prepare a strike team. Use the traps and draw them into the central streets." "They will not know what hit them." Laura nodded, her expression calm and determined. "Understood. Squad, move out." The humans moved with silent efficiency, slipping through alleyways, climbing rooftops, and positioning themselves perfectly for an ambush. The Krathar arrived soon after, larger in number than before. Their war cries echoed through the streets, terrifying the Zephyrians who hid in shelters. But the humans were ready. Traps triggered, collapsing sections of ruined buildings onto the Krathar. Energy charges sent shockwaves through the streets, knocking attackers off balance. Humans struck with precision, taking out leaders and leaving the enemy confused. Ryan moved with his squad, firing pulse weapons that disoriented the Krathar while simultaneously securing safe paths for the Zephyrians. "Keep them off balance," he shouted. "Do not let them regroup." Humans charged, ducked, rolled, and attacked with speed and force that no other species could match. Laura spotted a group of Krathar trying to flank through a narrow alley. She signaled, and humans appeared from hidden positions, striking from above and the sides. The aliens roared in panic, unable to predict the humans' movements. Laura herself struck the lead Krathar, knocking it down with a precise blow that left the others frozen in fear. The Zephyrians watched, their fear slowly turning into awe. They had asked for help, expecting healers or careful soldiers. Instead, they received humans who were unstoppable. Humans fought not only with strength but with cunning and creativity, turning the city itself into a weapon. Hours passed. The Krathar, though strong, were slowly being pushed back. Humans anticipated every move, set traps that forced the enemy into kill zones, and worked together with a coordination that left the aliens helpless. The city's streets, once a place of vulnerability, became a labyrinth of danger for the attackers. Ethan observed from above, noting the enemy's patterns and predicting their next moves. He relayed instructions to Laura and Ryan, who acted immediately. "They will try to regroup at the southern square," he said. "Block them there, draw them in." Laura nodded and moved her squad into position. When the Krathar appeared, they were trapped between explosives, nets, and human attackers. Chaos reigned in the enemy ranks. Humans struck without hesitation, clearing streets with deadly precision. The Zephyrians watched, understanding for the first time that humans did not fight for glory, they fought for survival and to protect others. Ryan detonated a controlled explosion that blocked one of the Krathar escape routes. "They're cornered," he shouted. "Finish this." Humans pressed forward, overwhelming the remaining attackers. Even when injured, they continued to fight, shrugging off pain that would have stopped any other species. By late afternoon, the Krathar began to retreat, their forces shattered and morale broken. Humans moved quickly to secure the city, checking for hidden enemies and rescuing wounded Zephyrians. The aliens were amazed at the humans' endurance and skill. They had survived battles that should have destroyed them, not by brute force alone, but by intelligence, adaptability, and fearlessness. Ethan approached a group of Zephyrians, speaking quietly. "Your people will survive because of them. Humans are different. They fight where others would run, and they protect where others would leave. Remember that." One young Zephyrian asked, trembling, Why do they do this? Why do they risk themselves for us?" Laura knelt, looking into the small alien's eyes. "Because we must. Survival is not just for ourselves. It is for those who cannot defend themselves. We fight because giving up is not an option. Fear is natural, but it does not control us. Humans do not stop, and we do not give up." The boy nodded slowly, trying to understand. It was a concept foreign to the Zephyrians, but they were beginning to see it through the humans' actions. Humans did not merely survive, adapted, fought, and thrived under conditions that would kill most species. As night fell, the city was quiet again, but humans remained vigilant. Patrols moved through the streets, checking traps, securing shelters, and keeping watch over the Zephyrians. The Krathar were regrouping somewhere beyond the horizon, planning another attack, but they had learned a hard lesson. Humans did not fight like anyone else in the galaxy. Ethan looked at the city, at the exhausted but determined humans moving through the streets, and said quietly, "They asked for aid, but they got humans, and humans do not fight like anyone else. That is why they survive." The Zephyrians, huddled in shelters, could finally rest, though lightly. They had survived another day because of humans. Their protectors were not ordinary soldiers. They were unstoppable, fearless, and relentless. Humans had turned their fragile city into a fortress, a place where life could continue even under the shadow of the Krathar. Laura and Ryan moved through the streets one last time before resting, checking for any signs of hidden enemies. Their bodies were tired, their muscles sore, but their resolve was unbroken. Humans did not stop when they were tired. They did not quit when the odds were against them. They fought until the end and often beyond. The Zephyrians watched silently, realizing that these humans were not only warriors, they were legends. Their strength was not just in their weapons or armor, but in their will, their courage, and their refusal to be defeated. Humans thrived where others failed, fought where others fled, and inspired hope in those who had none. Ethan observed quietly from above. The Krathar would return, but they would face a force they could not predict, a species they could not understand, and a determination they could not break. Humans were Deathworlders, survivors of harsh worlds and warriors born from struggle. They were the last hope for Varian Prime, and they would not fail. The night grew deep, the stars shining coldly above, but humans remained awake, vigilant, and prepared. The Zephyrians slept lightly, protected by beings who fought not for glory, but for life itself. Humans had transformed their city, their hope, and their fate. Ethan spoke softly to himself, watching the humans move among the streets. They asked for aid, but they got something far greater. They got humans, and humans do not fight like anyone else. The wind moved through the broken streets, carrying dust, smoke, and the faint sound of distant alarms. The Krathar were out there, regrouping and planning, but they did not yet understand the true danger that awaited them. Humans did not just fight, they transformed the battlefield, they inspired hope, and they refused to be broken. For the Zephyrians, this was a new reality. They had called for help, expecting fragile rescuers. Instead, they received humans, Earth's Deathworlders, who thrived in chaos, conquered fear, and proved that survival was not just about strength, it was about will. The night passed quietly, but humans patrolled, watched, and prepared for the next day. They had proven themselves once, but there were more battles to come. And when the Krathar returned, they would see that Earth's warriors were not to be underestimated. Humans did not surrender, did not yield, and never gave up. The Zephyrians awoke the next day, for the first time with real hope. Humans were among them, the city had survived, and the Krathar would soon learn that fighting humans was a mistake no one ever survived. Ethan looked at Laura and Ryan, exhausted but alert. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "But the Krathar will learn quickly that humans do not fight like any other species. They will learn why Earth's Deathworlders are feared across the galaxy." The humans moved on through the city, preparing for what would come next, their determination unbroken, their courage absolute, and their presence a shield for those who could not fight for themselves. Varian Prime had been saved for now, and the humans had shown what true strength and courage looked like. The sun rose over Varian Prime, spilling light across the battered city. The humans had not slept much, but they moved with purpose, preparing for the final confrontation. Captain Laura Mitchell surveyed the streets, her eyes sharp and calculating. Sergeant Ryan Carter checked the last of the traps they had set, making small adjustments to ensure the Krathar would find no advantage. Commander Ethan Blake observed from a nearby high point, watching the horizon for signs of the enemy. The Zephyrians, who had followed humans through fear and awe for days, now moved with a cautious confidence. They had seen the humans fight, had seen them survive attacks that would have destroyed any other species, and had begun to understand the meaning of courage. Even the youngest and smallest of the aliens held their heads higher, inspired by the humans' presence. Ethan's comms crackled. "Krathar fleet approaching from the east," he said calmly. "They are larger than before. Laura, this is it. You take the lead." Laura nodded. "Squad, prepare for full engagement. Remember, keep civilians safe and follow the plan. We strike hard and fast." No hesitation. Humans moved like shadows through the streets, positioning themselves in rooftops, alleys, and behind barricades. Every step was precise, every action calculated, yet every movement carried an air of unstoppable force. The first Krathar ships entered the atmosphere, dropping hundreds of soldiers onto the streets. Their weapons glowed with deadly intensity, their claws and armor shining in the sunlight. They expected the humans to retreat, to panic, to be afraid. But the humans did not know fear. They only knew survival, strategy, and relentless attack. Ryan triggered a series of traps, sending parts of ruined buildings collapsing onto the advancing Krathar. Energy charges lit the streets, creating a maze of danger that only the humans could navigate with ease. The aliens roared in frustration, their disciplined attacks broken by the unpredictable tactics of the humans. Laura led a squad through the central plaza, striking with precision and speed. Every movement was calculated, yet seemed chaotic to the Krathar. They could not predict where the humans would appear, how they would attack, or how they would exploit the environment. The Zephyrians watched from shelters, gasping at the humans' skill and bravery. Ethan coordinated from above, observing weak points in the enemy lines and directing humans to strike with maximum efficiency. "Left flank collapsing," he said. "Push forward and secure the square. Civilians are safe in the shelters." Humans moved swiftly, cutting through the enemy forces with deadly precision. Ryan used a combination of explosives and energy blasts to funnel the Krathar into narrow streets, where Laura and her squad were waiting. One by one, the attackers fell, unable to escape the humans' relentless assault. The Zephyrians whispered among themselves, realizing that humans were not just fighters, they were legends. Their strength was not only in their weapons or armor, but in their courage, their intelligence, and their unwillingness to yield. Humans could survive conditions that would kill most species, adapt to any threat, and protect those who could not fight for themselves. Hours passed and the Krathar regrouped for a desperate attack. Their commander, a massive, heavily armored alien, stepped forward, rallying the remaining soldiers. "Destroy them," it shouted. "Do not let them survive," Laura smiled slightly. "We've been waiting for you." She signaled to Ryan, who detonated a series of charges that collapsed part of a building, blocking the commander's path and funneling the attackers into a kill zone. Humans struck from all sides, moving like shadows, using every advantage the city offered. The Krathar commander roared in frustration, swinging its massive claws, but humans were everywhere. They struck with speed, precision, and courage, never stopping, never retreating. Even when injured, they continued to fight, shrugging off pain that would have ended any other species. Ethan observed from above, coordinating movements and watching the Krathar falter. "They are breaking," he said quietly. "Push forward, end this." Laura and her squad pressed the attack, cutting down the remaining Krathar with ruthless efficiency. Ryan used explosives to block escape routes, leaving no path for the enemy to flee. Humans were relentless, striking at weaknesses, exploiting every opening, and protecting the city and its people above all else. The Zephyrians watched in awe as the Krathar commander finally fell, struck down by a coordinated assault from Laura, Ryan, and their squad. The remaining Krathar soldiers, leaderless and confused, began to retreat. Humans did not give them an easy escape, but they did not pursue recklessly either. They had won, but they remained vigilant, securing the city and checking for hidden enemies. As night fell over the city, humans moved through the streets, helping Zephyrians, checking shelters, and ensuring that no threats remained. The Krathar fleet had been defeated, their ground forces destroyed, and the city secured. Varian Prime was safe, at least for now. Ethan approached a group of Zephyrians who had emerged from shelters to witness the victory. "Your people will survive," he said quietly. "Humans fight not for glory or conquest, but to protect those who cannot defend themselves. That is what makes us strong." The elder stepped forward, trembling but filled with gratitude. "Your people, they are incredible. We asked for aid, but you saved our lives. We could not have survived without you. How can we ever repay you?" Laura shook her head. "No repayment is necessary. Stay alive, protect each other. That is enough for us. You have done your part by surviving, and we have done ours by protecting you." A young Zephyrian, barely tall enough to reach Laura's waist, looked up at her. Why are you like this? Why do you risk yourselves for us?" Laura knelt, meeting the alien's wide eyes. "Because we must. Fear is natural, yes, but it does not control us. We fight for survival for others, and because giving up is not an option. Humans do not yield. We do not surrender. That is why we are here and why we fight." The boy nodded slowly, trying to understand. It was a foreign concept, but one that the humans had shown through action. Humans did not just survive, they thrived, adapted, and protected others when no one else could. Ethan looked over the city, now quiet and secured. "They asked for aid," he said softly, "but they got humans, and humans are not like anything they have seen before." The Zephyrians whispered among themselves, realizing that the humans had not only defended them but had transformed their fragile city into a fortress. Humans had fought where others would flee, survived conditions that would have killed most species, and inspired hope when all seemed lost. Laura and Ryan moved through the streets one last time, checking for wounded and ensuring the city was safe. Their bodies were tired, their muscles sore, but their spirits were unbroken. Humans did not stop when tired, and they did not quit when the odds were against them. They fought until victory was assured, and even then they remained vigilant. The stars shone cold and distant above, but humans remained awake, watching over the city and its people. The Krathar had been defeated, but they would regroup, and the humans would be ready. They always were. The Zephyrians, huddled in their shelters, could finally rest, though lightly. They had survived the greatest threat they had ever faced, and the humans had shown them what true courage, strength, and determination looked like. Humans had turned despair into hope, fear into confidence, and a ruined city into a fortress. Ethan looked at Laura and Ryan, exhausted but alert. "This is what humans do," he said quietly. "We survive, we protect, we fight where others flee, and we never give up. That is why we are feared, and that is why we are remembered." The Zephyrians slowly began to emerge from their shelters, approaching the humans with gratitude that went beyond words. They offered small gifts, gestures of thanks, and promises to remember the humans' courage. Laura and Ryan shook their heads, smiling. "Stay alive," they said simply. "That is enough." As night fell completely, the city of Varian Prime was quiet. The Krathar had been driven off, their forces shattered, and the humans had proven themselves unstoppable. Ethan watched silently from a vantage point, thinking about the battle and the courage he had seen. Humans were not just survivors, they were legends. They thrived where others would perish, fought where others would run, and inspired hope in those who had none. The Zephyrians looked at their protectors, understanding finally that these humans were extraordinary. They had asked for aid, but what had arrived was something far greater. Humans were more than soldiers. They were symbols of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable will to survive. Laura, Ryan, and Ethan gathered in the central plaza, watching the city they had saved. It was quiet now, peaceful, though the damage remained. "We did what we had to do," Laura said softly. "The Krathar are gone and these people are alive. That is enough." Ryan grinned. "And they will never forget it. Neither will anyone else in the galaxy who hears about this." Ethan nodded. "They will remember. Humans are not just survivors. We are warriors. We fight, we protect, and we endure. And that is why the galaxy fears and respects us." The Zephyrians, fragile yet alive, began to rebuild with hope. Humans had shown them that survival was possible, that courage mattered more than fear, and that no enemy could stand against beings who refused to be broken. Above them, the stars shone silently, bearing witness to the triumph of humans. Varian Prime had been saved, its people protected, and its future preserved. The humans had arrived as saviors, and they had left as legends. Ethan spoke quietly, almost to himself. "They asked for aid, but the Deathworlders of Earth came instead. And we did what humans always do. We fought, we survived, and we protected. That is our way. That is why we are unstoppable." The night stretched on, calm and peaceful for the first time in months. The Krathar would not return soon, and when they did, they would face a force they could not predict, a species they could not understand, and a determination they could not break. Humans were unstoppable, fearless, and unyielding. They were Deathworlders, and they had proven it. The Zephyrians, small and fragile, slept with hope in their hearts. The humans watched over them, their presence a silent promise that as long as they stood, Varian Prime would never fall. The city was safe. The people were alive. And the legend of the humans would spread across the stars.